welcome everybody to this session of Catalyzing Change Week. And before we start, we'll just play a little video that gives you an idea of what Catalyst 2030 is. It's a global network, and they're the ones who organized this week. So I'll just request Vinita to play a short video on Catalyst 2030.
Catalyst 2030 is a movement of social entrepreneurs and innovators embracing collective action to achieve the SDGs by the deadline 2030. Our 1,500 members are active in 197 countries. By emphasizing collaborations, Catalyst 2030 is leveraging the power of the collective to accelerate real change in the lives of billions of people around the globe. What do our members say about Catalyst?
Catalyst 2030 is an invaluable global community of impact entrepreneurs.
Our relationship with Catalyst 2030 has really taught us the power of co-creation.
Join Catalyst 2030 and network, bond, and collaborate with our family members.
And I like the spirit of bringing change makers together to share and learn from each other.
Catalyst really understands the transformative nature of collaboration.
It's also a platform that can give us new tools and resources.
Catalyst 2030 has put my work on steroids.
But most importantly, to come up with solutions that are practical, ways where we can really make things happen, because social entrepreneurs are doers.
Are you a catalyst? Join us to achieve the SDGs.
Okay, so welcome everyone again. And as you just heard, Catalyst 2030 is here because they want to accelerate the SDGs. And in this session, we are going to talk about the artisan sector, which many of you know that actually meets many of the SDGs, almost 12 of the 17 SDGs. And we're talking of a sector which actually has been around for, 2000 years. Before I get a little bit into the context of why we are doing this session, I'd just like to introduce all our eminent panelists over here. I'll start with Dr. Badri Narayanan. He's an economist working with the NITI Ayog as the lead advisor on trade and commerce policy strategies, which is at the rank of Joint Secretary. He's also been an advisor, consultant on the board of many eminent organizations. I'm not going to name all of them, but some of them are McKinsey, the UN, World Bank, ILO, KPMG, IMF, Howard University. It's a very, very long list. So we're very privileged to have him here. He has also been the co-founder and director of the Policy Modeling Association for Inclusive Development. Welcome, Dr. Badri Narayanan. Our next panelist is Ms. Moe Chiba. She is presently the Chief of Culture Unit at the UNESCO Jakarta Office, which covers Brunei, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, and Timor-Leste. She began her career with the UNESCO and has been pivotal in the division of cultural policies, in charge of developing a new international convention for the UNESCO on the diversity of cultural content and artistic expressions. In 2006, she moved to the UNESCO Delhi office, so she understands the Indian artisan sector really well. And her work has been to mainstream culture into the development process in practice beyond theory. Welcome, Moe, and looking forward to hearing you. Osama Manzar, next, is the global leader who has a mission of eradicating information poverty in India and the global south through using digital tools. He co-founded Digital Empowerment Foundation in 2002, and with over 25 years of experience, Osama has worked in the areas of journalism, new media, software development before DEF. DEF currently has reached 20 million people directly, has a footprint of 1,000 locations, and 9,000 plus digital foot soldiers across 130 districts in 24 states. Currently, so this is the 20th year of DEF, Osama. Congratulations. And Nisha Subramaniam, who's also a colleague. She's a social entrepreneur who works with women artisans in the Himachal, but she's also been a visiting faculty at the Shrishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bangalore, Center for Environment Planning and Technology, that is CEPT University in Ahmedabad. She has been motivated to develop local supply chains with herders, pastoralists, and weavers in the Himachal region. She's also been a very active member of Creative Dignity since 2021, since this network began as a response to the pandemic for the artisans. Her background is in technology, and she has been able to bring a lot of her understanding and skills to applying it to the artisan sector. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Nisha. So with this introduction, I will just set a little context of what we're going to discuss today. So it's about the artisan sector, yes, and why we still need to seek solutions for it. But it is also about understanding whether technology can address some of its long-standing issues. People have dealt and approached with the sector very differently. I mean, right from Gandhi, for whom it was the foundation of his political economy, to just after independence, when we saw the sector as an income-generating sector. And recently, now, since the last 20 years, it has now been in the public imagination, internationally and in India, with artisans having arrived on the urban scene, with designers wanting to make this an expression of identity. Now, more recently, and particularly after the pandemic, we hear a lot more about the potential the sector has to show the way for more sustainable production and consumption, to pave the way for a more regenerative economy. That is now, it's become very urgent, the climate crisis, both for the millennial, the policy planners, and for the world at large. And many are turning to this sector as a potential solution. But is it really so easy? And is it easier said than done? Because the sector is informal. The sector has its own intelligence because it's a self-organized sector. It has its social inequalities and imbalances because it is a very, very ancient practice which has carried on and evolved and readapted itself. But the informality gives it certain vulnerabilities, while it also has fostered a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of diversity, a lot of potential for very vulnerable artisans to actually break free and to thrive and to prosper. But this has not happened for the majority. And the reasons are that it's too diverse a sector. It's a challenge for any planner, any policymaker, even for a buyer or a retailer to engage with the sector. It's difficult because of the diversity. So often the response to the diversity is a very fragmented one. For example, the government has almost 13 ministries and 30 plus departments dealing with the sector at large. Now, this has created a fragmented approach, which in turn has led us to the perception that the sector is really all about fragmented supply chains. So where do we go from here? There is an opportunity and there is a challenge. So I will now begin this session and direct my question first to Dr. Badri Narayanan. Would you tell us a little bit about the artisan sector as an informal economy? What are its strengths? What are its challenges? And what's the approach that works in an informal space? Sorry, before I go to you, Mr. Badri Narayanan, I do need to mention one thing about this session's title, which is the new formal. So this we really want to explore that whether the time has come to bridge this gap between the informal and the formal in a way that maintains the strength of the informality, yet brings in the benefit of the formal. And I would just like to also mention that while this has been done in practice in many, many instances, it's perhaps still not a coherent structure that we have been able to come out with. And I would also like to mention that this term, the new formal, was actually put out as a theoretical framework by 200M, an organization that is working on research on the sector, which talks about exactly this, about connecting the formal and informal in a very innovative way. Sorry, please go ahead, Dr. Badri Narayanan.
Thank you very much, Meeraji, for having me here. Um, I'm very happy to be here, and the discussion that we are having now is extremely important, uh, because if you take any developing country, or like in this context, India, the informal sector is really quite large, and and also SME, small and medium enterprises in general, is also quite substantial. So and if you think about the strengths of this informal economies, the biggest strength is that it from a personal point of view, from an individual point of view, it's the easiest way for somebody to upgrade oneself from an employee mode to an employer mode, or a salaried person or wage earning individual to a value creating individual. So that way, rather than somebody who looks for investment from a venture capitalist and start really big, the informal economies, the participants in the informal economy, they are adding value from the scratch, from the very basic situation. And then today we call bootstrapping. So the bootstrapping is a new term, but that's what traditionally the informal entrepreneurs have been doing. So so that's the main strength actually. So it's and from an individual point of view, from an organizational point of view, or from a country point of view, or a state or a broader perspective, societal perspective, informal industry is a pretty huge contributor to the economy. They employ a lot of people. So if you take artisans, I think there are around there are thousands of artisans, but there are around in the government, we have based on some data sets, some surveys and so on, we have identified that there are around 7 million artisans across the country in India. So that's the thing. There is a huge contribution. So even if you say that the 7 million artisans employ, or directly or indirectly they employ a couple of people at the minimum, you're easily talking about a huge multiplier effect. So 7 million people on whom that could be like 20, 30, 40 million people benefit from that. So in terms of weaknesses, I think the biggest weakness is that they are not able to take advantage of a lot of schemes by the government, which typically support industries that are registered somewhere, which are registered formally. So by definition, only formally registered companies, even if they are small, they get a lot of benefits from the government, and but of course, the other side of the same coin is that you also don't pay taxes if you're not in the system, right? And the second big weakness is that they don't have the scale, nor do they have the wherewithal to connect with the market directly. So of course they can connect with the lower end of the market. They can go to a local market and sell their products, or they can sell it to a big dealer who may be focused more on cost minimization. So they may just exploit them to take their products at a very low cost and then sell it at an exorbitant price to the consumers. So they have to face all these difficulties, market access to market. So that is another major weakness. So I can keep talking about all these strengths and weaknesses, but I would rather go forward and think about the role of MSMEs in the economy overall, particularly in the rural economy. So that is something that has direct connection with what I said now. So first, the biggest contribution is in terms of employment and in terms of income generation for the majority of the country. So today we're talking about startups and unicorns and innovation and so on, and they should definitely keep going, and we need those. And on the other hand, we also have these small enterprises uh, which thrive on very little income, very few employees, but then they add up to a big number totally because there are so many of them. Now the challenges to formalization. So I already talked about the weaknesses of informal economy. So why do the informal sector players not register and not become formal? Um, uh, it's just a flip side of what I said earlier. Like the strengths of informal sector are the weaknesses of formal sector, and the other way around. So one major strength of formal sector is that it's connected to the market. You have the scale, you have the direct connection to the consumers, and then you also have access to the government schemes and so on. So so that is a formalization, the strength of formalization. The weakness is that it requires a lot of capital, requires a lot of connection, and it also requires technology in today's world. So that leads to the last point I'm going to discuss here, which is how to link the artisan sector to the global supply chains. When you're talking about artisans, you're talking about very small players and the informal players that I just mentioned. How do you organize them, and how do you get them to the global supply chains? And that is where I think the technology plays an important role, and this kind of inclusivity of technology. So we also we can get into another debate wherein we can say that the technologies have displaced employment, reduced employment, displaced workers, and so on. But there is a huge role for technology to play in facilitating inclusive development, in facilitating this, in this example, the informal workers and informal entrepreneurs to join the mainstream. How do they join the mainstream? You take the technologies, the facilitators, they can take the marketing part away from the artisans. The artisan can focus on what they are really good at, which is like to produce really wonderful products. And we have a lot of traditional products in India and many other countries. They have their own traditional arts, and you can produce them. And they don't have to worry about marketing, and that marketing part can be dealt with by a technology or by a facilitating organization which takes up all these all the products they have and bring it to the global supply chains, digitally market them, and so on. So I think that is an important missing piece of the puzzle, which can be filled by the other side that we talked about. The formal sector can come in here. You can have startups which can focus on this kind of causes, and there is money in there also. Like there can be money that can be made commercially successful, and commercials a venture that is commercially successful for at the other end, the consumer's end, is also going to benefit the artisans, and that is something the startups or the digital sector can keep in mind, that the benefits also should go to the artisans. So I think that is one thing. From the government's point of view, there are a lot of schemes to promote traditional arts and artisans. We have this GI scheme, geographical indicators, and we also have this one district, one product. So a lot of the one district, one products are basically food products, but also if you take, for example, the UP state, many of them are also traditional arts. So you have in some states you have traditional arts also considered as part of one district, one product, and in others it's not. So you have all these schemes, and they can be identified by the government that these are the traditional arts and these can be promoted, and there are specific incentives for that to promote that. So I think that, and they're also global. We talk about global supply chains here. So we're also as part of Government of India, we are also promoting this GI and one district, one product, district as export hubs, and all these things globally. When we talk to other partner countries, we do talk about these things, and these are all to benefit artisans as well. So I'll take a pause here and look forward to listening to others.
Thank you, Dr. Narayanan. We will come back to you to see how we could actually take your help in pushing some of the suggestions that might come out in this session a little later. I'll go now to Moe. Moe, could you tell us about, internationally, how is this sector perceived? Share your experience of working with artisan communities across the world. And also, has the pandemic made a difference? What is the approach that other artisan-rich countries have taken to their practitioners?
Yes, sure, Meera. Good evening, everybody, and good evening from Jakarta. It's 8 p.m. here, and thank you very much for inviting me back to the beginning of something that looks like an exciting new venture. Now, sorry, do you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. Now, when I came in India back in 2006, I remember there was a kind of hue and cry because I think at a certain meeting, one minister called craft sector a sunset sector. It's like a dead sector. Perhaps that would not be worthwhile investing the government budget anymore. Now, fortunately, at the global level, there's a kind of firm recognition of a craft sector, at least as a valuable heritage to be protected. Well, perhaps you are here, people here have heard of a UNESCO Convention, International Agreement on the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. Now, traditional craft is considered as one of the domains of intangible cultural heritage. And this convention has a list, a representative list, where the countries can submit the proposals for the nominations of their most important intangible cultural heritage. And craft constitutes quite important numbers of nominations from the countries. There's also an understanding that the craft is indispensable if you want to protect a certain traditional festivals or performing arts, because you need artisans to make costumes and puppets and masks and whatnot. Now, then naturally, when you look at the work of the UN agencies in general, craft is obviously a very important sector. Abner, you can go to the next slide. Um, it's important for the UN simply because it's especially for the global south, and as Mr. Badri already mentioned, it's one big employment sector. If you talk about the creative economy in the global south, actually we are talking most of the time about the craft sector. And it's also the areas that are closely associated with women empowerment or social inclusions of the tribal people, for instance. So obviously that craft sector constitute one of the favorite area of intervention for the UN agencies. And I'm sure many of the members who are here have worked for the UN agency in one way or other and must be very familiar with this situation. Now, having said this, there is not a kind of global program, or a unified standard approach to craft sector that are being implemented from UNESCO, from any other UN agencies. Of course, simply because craft is very context special. It's linked with its own historical context and the socioeconomic situation of the people. So obviously, you cannot have a standard method or a program that applies to several countries at the same time. But if you look at what the different countries are doing, and you can go to the next slide, I think their interventions fall into one, or I mean, all the countries are doing one or several of these interventions. One intervention consists of raising the public status of artisans. In India, you do this through the awards, Master Artisans Award. In Japan, you have a program recognizing the master craftsman as a living treasure. And then you also have different programs aiming at giving a social protection schemes to the artisans, like pensions and health insurances. And then you have countless numbers of capacity building activities in terms of finance, design, production, marketing. And then there are, of course, all the countries have one way or other branding and marketing initiatives. For instance, in Maldives, they have created a national brand called Made in Maldives to try to distinguish their work from those coming from Indonesia. And of course, and then a lot of works are also going on in terms of public awareness raising and new market creations. In Indonesia, for instance, they have declared the 2nd of October as National Batik Day. So on that day, everybody has to talk about batik that day, and every Friday, all the government officials have to wear batik. So that kind of, and then you have something similar in different countries. And then there's a lot of effort also going on in terms of changing the social structures across sector, from making it graduating from the informal economy to the formal economy by creating a cooperatives or by registering them. India again had a lot of those programs at that time. Now, so these are the existing schemes if you look around the world on what each country is doing in terms of promoting their craft sector. And now the question is, and today's topic is, then how can IT sector bring the new solution to the different needs of the craft sector, ranging from the capacity building of artisans to marketing to structural change to whatnot. And here's my little observations. I think when I was still living in India and back in 2010, I've observed that a lot of young techies at that time has jumped into the craft retail section because they were good at in making websites. So many of them started opening the online sales portal for the craft. However, and then it was very interesting to see new kind of actors working in the craft sector. However, what I observed, a flip side, is that these IT techies became a sort of new middleman, and that was not the most efficient situation. These kids were very good at IT, but they were not the professionals of the entire value chain of the craft sector, ranging from product development, quality control, stock management, shipping, time management, etc. So at the end of the day, all these entities were struggling to handle this value chain that they were not actually trained to do. And so at the end, they were not able to handle the volume of the business. And my guess is that not many of them survived at the end. And another negative aspect which I observed at that time is that it kind of also perpetuated the old models of this patron-led craft sector, maintaining this craft people's sense of dependency. Instead of like teaching artisans to use that skills, these young techies actually came as a new kind of patron, right? Replacing these rich ladies. So so my hunch is that a new model should be probably different than what I have observed some 10 years back. The IT skills are indispensable, definitely, but the question that we, I think, have to address is where are we going to intervene? At what level of value chain are we going to intervene using the IT skills? And what would be the most effective, knowing that we cannot intervene at all the levels? And and I still have this question as to whether it's necessary to train the artisans themselves in the IT skills, or should we train the coordinating body like NGOs? Should we do the capacity building of NGOs instead of artisans? This is something I still kind of question. I mean, based on my experience, and I hope this will be perhaps part of the discussions this evening. I stop here for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Moe, you still have some, I think I see another slide come up.
Okay, yes, this is actually a slide for the next questions about the what we are doing in India.
Okay.
Sorry,
Would you like
Indonesia,
to
sorry,
share it
Indonesia. Would
now
you
that
like
it
me
has
to?
come up, would you like to share it? Maybe that can be a good segue then to go to.
Okay, if you think that it's okay. Yes, so now as Meera has introduced, I moved from India to Indonesia back in 2018. And at that time, we started a program called Creative Youth at Indonesian Heritage Sites. And well, and under this program, we are mentoring some 100 young entrepreneurs, cultural entrepreneurs or startups who are living around the famous heritage destinations like World Heritage Sites and other famous popular tourism destinations to develop their business skills. And now, and when you look at the composition of those young startups, actually more than half are the what we call the artisans, like batik makers and weavers and sculptors and whatnot. And they seem to correspond very much to a typical kind of situation of artisans in India. They are from the informal economy, and they are from small towns or rural villages, and typically fall outside the governmental support scheme, whatever that exists, because of being in the informal economy. So we started this program to address the absence of good policy, or the methodology for the from the government to address the capacity building of this particular segment of populations of the young artisans and young creative startups. So the slide shows where we are intervening. So you might, in case you are planning to visit Indonesia, yes, these are some of the lovely destinations you can consider visiting. You and then let's go to the next slide. Now, in terms of the interventions, okay, there's nothing particularly new, perhaps, to all of you here who are working in the craft sector for many years, but we provide a varied range of training, ranging from financial literacy, business planning, market assessment, brand image development, and marketing. And then we also combined these training with a session on heritage values of the place to give for them to understand what are the particularity of their craft that is associated to the local sites. And another exercise we do typically is the matchmaking between these young entrepreneurs and the industrial players for possible collaboration. And we, of course, during the COVID, we put a particular emphasis to ensure that digital presence, because the pandemic had a special toll on the cultural industry with dwindling market. And then everybody, literally everybody, artisans, musicians, artists, everybody turned into the online platforms for the sales or public outreach. So obviously, this is a new skill that even the traditional artisan had to acquire. So in that domain, we taught young entrepreneurs how to open their social media marketplace, present their works through appealing photos and stories. And we also organized the virtual fashion shows and virtual sales for artisans and designers. And we also work with musicians, so we also supported them in creating the promotional videos. Now, I'm sure many of you in this meeting has been doing something similar. But what I'd like to share with you is, okay, how UNESCO positioned ourselves, in this whole exercise. Because at the end of the UNESCO, we said that it's a UN agency, but UNESCO Jakarta Office is very small. The one where I'm sitting is very small. We are just not so much different from an NGO. So, so the question is, how am I going to position the myself or my office in terms of the all the training needs of these young artisans and cultural entrepreneurs? Besides, UNESCO is not the marketing experts. I mean, myself, social media influencers. We are not the filmmakers. We are not the product design advisors. We are not expert in the retails. And on top of that, unlike the government or the banks, UNESCO can even not offer any grants or the loans, to the artisans. So, so in this, so when you have own limitations and the limited mandate, question is how am I going to still make UNESCO useful? And so the answer is that we're acting like matchmakers. We try to position ourselves as a matchmakers between various experts, government schemes, and these artisans. So our role is to connect the dots, but not to substitute the role of each and every experts and the different value chains of the craft sector. So, but while we limit ourselves in being, how can I say, dot connectors, we still have a lot to do on the platter. So what we do is the need assessment. Every year we do the need assessment of each artisans group to understand what kind of training they have to receive. And then we have to, of course, continuously identify and mobilize good experts, new partners, and do the matchmaking between the interested parties. And our another important role is to moderating, the dialogues to keep going on and dynamic. So, so for instance, and then we have this WhatsApp group, for instance, amongst the artisans and experts, so that there are some kind of informal mentorship going on between the artisans and different experts beyond the specific workshop. So the question is, would that be perhaps a role of DEF or the creative catalyst, can play in India? This model worked in Indonesia because it's so far it works in Indonesia because it's a more egalitarian society. It's Muslims, they don't have a caste system, and there's a kind of respect. There's a kind of mutual respect between the different social hierarchies. But but the question for in India, I know India has a specific challenge of having many craft sector actors. You have much bigger craft sectors than Indonesia, I believe, and you also have a typical kind of particularity of not collaborating. Um, Many of it's I think Meera just saying that it's fragmented, and that is also exactly my impression. Many of different craft actors also deal with one different specific aspects of value chain. So some are specialized in research, some are specialized in design, or somebody is specialized in marketing but not in research. And so I don't see a kind of collaboration happening between the different experts or the of the craft sector. And another and in the past, those NGOs that were successful in showing some results were those who are yeah, sorry, Bhakti, I was just finished. Those who are successful were those who actually handling entire value chain. You are one big entity doing everything from design development up to marketing, training and marketing. But then ultimately, this is not a very viable model because you need a lot of resource. And so the question is, what would be the uh, new model for India to connect dots, connecting dots between the different actors of the craft sector, and how IT and DEF and Creative Catalyst can play the role. Okay, sorry, I stop here. I went on too far, too long.
No.
Over to you. Yeah, over to you, Meera.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm Japanese. I'm not supposed to be talking too much here.
Right. No, I think that you've kind of opened out the ground for us now to go to the next panelist, Nisha. So Nisha, if you can tell us a little bit about, how to, especially with the pandemic, and in fact, that's something I wanted to tell Moe, that, post the pandemic, a lot of collaboratives came up, even for the, generally speaking, people were collaborating, and even for the artisan sector. So creative dignity itself, that Nisha will speak about, was one such collaborative. There have been others. So we hope that, this is probably a point where we can transition to a new way of being. Nisha, can I ask you here that how do, you yourself are from a technology background, and you did see how technology came in a very big way during the pandemic, and particularly in a sector which has shunned technology, by and large. So what has been your experience? How do you see the challenges moving forward, and what have been some of the, takeaways for you?
Thanks, Meera. So I just want to apologize if there's a lot of disturbance. I'm at the airport, so just bear with me. When sort of the e-commerce whole bug came into the country, say maybe 10, 15 years ago, the artisan sector deliberately stayed away from it. And they never saw technology as being really that necessary for them. And especially as Dr. Badri has said, it was the informal sector. And they had their traditional models all down pat, and that's what they have always been comfortable with selling through, which were the exhibitions, the retail outlets, the hearts, the wholesalers, as well as trade shows. Now, during the pandemic, of course, all this completely collapsed. As well as all these being shut down, trader movement was restricted. So wholesalers who would typically go into craft communities, engage with them, dialogue, bargain and buy products, stop doing that. So there were whole that entire sort of relationship also broke down, and they were just not open to doing that over the phone or over WhatsApp. The other thing, and this was on the market side. On the other side, from the supply chain side, there was a paucity of raw material, getting raw materials, prices went up. And of course, this led to a lot of inventory piling up and a paucity of working capital for the entire sector. So with all this happening, of course, we saw that there was a need for artisans to, just think differently, to sort of innovate and skill up necessarily. But despite that, also, though a few did embrace e-commerce solutions, the main reason for it wasn't, one was, of course, the obvious reason where, artisans necessarily need to connect with their customers. Storytelling is a big part of their sales as well. But the larger reason was also that the e-commerce business models did not necessarily fit an artisan's inventory model. So one is, you had to first take digital photographs, upload it, have SKUs there, fill up long Excel sheets with this. And of course, when products are sold, you necessarily had to have shipping happen. And a lot of artisans are in remote locations where this sort of delivery and customers expect high standards from e-commerce sites. And that was impossible. A lot of time, real time, if products sold on e-commerce sites, artisans, or if products sold on their traditional channels, they couldn't necessarily keep that up in real time, removing their inventory from e-commerce sites. So they really did not, enjoy this model. And even if there were certain e-commerce models where they would buy a whole lot of stock from artisans, sell it themselves, do the delivery themselves, and then send back what was not sold. Again, this did not work for a lot of the community because they really did not want their stock back. Once it was bought by the site, they were just there, sort of forgotten about it in their inventory. And a lot of times goods came back damaged. So this really did not work for a large part of the sector. So our challenge during this collapse of the traditional markets and the pandemic was to try and see what are the types of solutions that can come up, which really, get this community moving into a technology framework. Now, in my work also, I've worked with pastoral communities and artisan communities, and I've always been looking at where technology can intervene. And the traditional model of e-commerce never seemed to fit Where technology did help a lot was in data gathering. So especially we did this project with Pastoral Communities where we needed, and they are artisan communities as well as being pastoralists. We needed a lot of data for advocacy. The nomadic shepherds, they traverse the mountain regions, and a lot of their land has been taken away by the forest authorities, as well as a lot of the commons where the sheep graze. So for us to sort of come up with, a good, for us to sort of alert the policymakers about this and gather data about where they traditionally graze, we needed solutions to track this. So we did this project with students in Srishti, and one of the students came up with a very socially embedded solution where we realized we had to track the shepherds' movement across remote areas. So, and we needed some sort of wearable technology, which they're not going to throw away as they're walking their thousands of kilometers. So he realized like a lot of the shepherds carry spindles, taklis. So he inserted a GIS chip in this, and it's a small takli which they carry as they're walking, and they sometimes spin it. So he inserted a GIS chip in this, which track their movements, and they always carry it on their body. They don't leave it here or there. And this continuously transmitted, their whereabouts all over. And this was tracked by a server real time. And this way we could map the areas they travel, where their sheep graze, and sort of then come up with a real, tangible data that these are the lands that shepherds, traditionally use and have been using for hundreds of years. So, so the thing that we realized was that technology can intervene, but the solution really needs to be very context sensitive and very embedded in. So that was one of our learnings from our own experiences. Now, with creative dignity, what happened with the whole artisan sector with the collapse of markets? We came up with, so right after when, when there was this inventory, when the markets completely shut down 6 months into the pandemic, a lot of more than 200, 300 volunteers from the craft sector, domain experts came together. So these were designers, marketplaces, academics, social entrepreneurs, all came together to see what they could do for the artisan sector. And the first thing we came up with was sort of a technology solution, but the easiest was to just say, let's do digital online catalogs. So we had interns do WhatsApp calls with artisans, connect with them. So if you see the second photograph out there, we literally had artisans display their products, walk around their homes to find a spot that was good, get them to take good pictures in good light, and then send these pictures back on WhatsApp. And then the interns made all these catalogs. And these were about 300 or so online catalogs, which we sent through buyer meets, and we had these direct WhatsApp areas. We also partnered with a lot of about 12 e-commerce marketplaces. And again, we intervened to sort of do the whole photography, putting up the, bringing artisans on board to these platforms so that they could sell through these e-commerce areas. Through our network, we also explored other solutions like online auctions. We partnered with 200 million artisans and Saffron Art, and we had a lot of donations from connoisseurs of art and craft in the industry who donated their heritage pieces, and these were auctioned, and this raised a lot of funds which came back, and it was an online auction, and this was sent back into the community. There was also, we're also exploring NFTs. One of our partners, Eki Beki, is partnered with folk artisans, and they're looking at folk artists actually, and they're looking at NFTs where they collaborate with urban artists and come up with one-off pieces which are sold in NFT marketplaces. And this has also generated a lot of conversation within the creative dignity ecosystem, where we're looking at authenticity, transparency, and things in this digital world. So those were a few things.
Can I take the liberty of just coming in a little bit because we are running a little late, and I think we just need to also talk about the Artisan Digipreneur model. I think Bhakti has shared a link about CD's work with technology, so maybe people can go through it later. So can we just go headlong into talking about, what is this Artisan Digipreneur model, and bring in Osama also into this conversation. Oh, sorry. You want to just finish what you're saying? Yeah, you can finish.
No, so actually to just go into that, to the Artisan Digipreneur model, one of our learnings when we did this, so we started this program called the Artisan Sati program, which we realized that for artisans, now we were still sort of intervening, and there was people who were technologically savvy working with the artisans. But we really, as Dr. Badri has said, we wanted it to be inclusive. We want technology is a space that can be inclusive, and we wanted to build capacity within the sector for artisans so they can kind of compete as equals in this space. And with that as a vision, we sort of started this Artisan Sati program, where we partnered with, where we had volunteers going into artisan communities, training them with digital photography, training them with Google Pay accounts, building their own catalogs. And we did this for over 50 artisans, and it was a completely online model. But the gap that we saw in this was that there are various contexts. And as everyone has said, that this is a fragmented area. There are various social contexts. So we wanted it to be, we realized there has to be an offline presence in the places that we are working with artisans. And so we were looking for a collaboration for this. You can go into the next slide. And so we realized that we really have to build up capacity in this sector if we want artisans to participate as a community, as a technologically savvy community, and which is why we've sort of partnered with DEF and started the Artisan Digipreneur program. So this is something, Meera, if you want, I think Osama can talk about this, and then we can talk about where.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Nisha, and sorry I had to butt in a bit because we're really running a little late. So I think if both you, Nisha and Osama, can let us know a little bit about how we are going to co-create this model, and how do we propose to, handle the other trappings of the sector, which is that it is based in human connection, human relationships. It's a different kind of behavioral change that one is looking at. So maybe Osama can share a little bit about his experience of working with technology with vulnerable communities, and at the same time ensuring agency and autonomy of the communities, so that they don't become products of the way we are seeing technology converting people into products. Osama, would you like to come in and share a little bit about your experience, but also how we are co-creating this model?
Yeah, okay. Since we have been talking for a very long time, can we have a small video just to lighten the moment?
Sure.
Sari weaving isn't just our livelihood, it's our passion. One that's been with us for 700 years. We weave our saris in a magnificent palace, once occupied by the King of Madhya Pradesh. Its beauty and charm inspires us to create beauty in return. We are constantly striving to explore new avenues of creativity. We want the world to experience our designs and appreciate the artistry of our craft. A tradition we are proud to share far and wide, from Chanderi to you. Learn more at chanderia.net.
Okay, it's a very old video, but actually it shows the local ecosystem. It also shows that technology can actually play a role, and it also shows international linkages. So before I talk about Artisan Digipreneur, I just wanted to highlight, based on everybody's concern, everybody's talk, and everybody's contribution, is that the biggest reason why I would say that we are struggling and we are informal and we are not becoming formal is that the very basic role of dissecting between brick and mortar and information and knowledge. So we need to understand that the world has moved to become, actually this screen can be removed. The world has moved from, just brick and mortar model to an information economy and knowledge economy. So it's very important. If you see in the entire MSME sector, the artisan sector, the weaving sector, you will see that the sector that is suffering is because of the huge gap of them being part of the information economy and the knowledge economy and the communication system. And that is the reason why, from being a designer, from being a knowledge worker, they ultimately become a laborer. So, all the artisans are actually considered to be laborers. They are not part of the information and communication and knowledge system of the whole supply chain. And that gap will continue to be informal, exploitative, as long as we are not making them merge together. So I just highlighted the problem. So what I'm actually trying to say is that the artisan should be as knowledgeable as the designer in between, as knowledgeable as the market itself, as knowledgeable or linked as the buyer herself, and so on and so forth, the entire supply chain. After that, you take a decision of charging less and not reaching to a market, not supplying to certain, not agreeing to certain design is a separate issue. But at the moment, this entire sector, which we are aspiring to make formal, is actually suffering from this huge information gap, knowledge gap, and communication gap. And that is where what we are actually, all these three is what we are calling as a technology gap. Actually, because the technology enables that. Unfortunately, that we are still considering that as a technology, although it should have been just a communication enablement of the entire sector. So coming now, fast forward, having done few exercises in the, CD has done in COVID, we have been doing for the last 12, 13 years, because we are digital sector or intervener, and we think that digital can solve all the problems. We think digital is manna from heaven, and we think it can solve all the problems. So far we haven't been proven wrong, but so looks like that we need to make technology not sound like technology. And that is what this digital or artisan digipreneur is all about. What is it in it? There is an artisan, we are not disturbing that. There is a cluster, we are not disturbing that. There is a communication infrastructure required, we are intervening, saying now you need an additional infrastructure, which is a digital infrastructure, which is a communication infrastructure, which is an information infrastructure, which is a knowledge infrastructure. We are bringing that in the hands of an artisan, not all the artisan which is more entrepreneurial, who is aspiring to become more enterprising, who is ready to take leadership position, to take responsibility of the entire cluster or the community of supply chain, information transaction, knowledge transaction, and so on and so forth. And this person is actually trained and capacitated to deal with all kind of information exchange, knowledge exchange. Also, not only information as information, but information as service, information as knowledge, information as wisdom, information as design, information as marketplace, information as e-commerce, information as supply chain, information as photography, making catalog, and so on and so forth. So this is actually what we are aspiring between CD and DEF and a whole lot of all of you who are 51 people here, and then hundreds and thousands of people behind you, is that can we take this digital infrastructure in the hands of the people who are artisans, weavers, heritage keepers, tourism keepers, linguistic diversity people, food and culinary diversified people, and so on and so forth, and use this technological infrastructure for all kind of ecosystem that is missing from your cluster to be directly connected to the market or the consumer or the supply chain in the entire ecosystem. That's actually it is. We have been doing this experiment in a different scale so far, but with CD, what we are going to do is that we are also trying to make it, can it work sustainably? That means we provide this infrastructure in one time, but not all the time supporting. Can they maintain and manage themselves? Can they serve the people themselves? Can they earn money out of it themselves? That's the idea with this one. We are starting with double-digit number, fortunately, but we are planning to get into 3-digit, and then 4 or 5 digits in the next 3 to 5 years, to cover what Badri said as there are 7 million artisans. Can they be covered with the number of digital leaders or digital entrepreneurs who can actually, or digital artisans who can take responsibility of that entire ecosystem, can be embedded with digital integration? So I will stop there. And, I hope we may have some time to have some discussion.
Yeah, we can actually open it out to questions, because what you just explained to us, of course, it's going to be a small experiment which hopefully can show the way ahead, but would it lead to a formalization? I think that's really something we will find out with time, and what actually would need to be done for this kind of formalization. I mean, for example, would the 13 ministries and the 30 departments that we have, Dr. Badri Narayanan, is there even a chance that if they all come together in one ministry, then some kind of formalization, even through through digital means and other efforts put together, can become possible? So we can open it out to a discussion. I know we are running out of time, but it's just be good to hear everyone.
Can I add one string to what I was saying? What I also realize is that each and every artisan cluster is a linguistic destination, tourism destination, heritage destination, market destination, and cultural destination. But unfortunately, we, like you said, many ministries can work together. I mean, how we haven't been able to integrate with GI being GI location, being heritage, history and heritage and tourism and everything together, so that it becomes every rural area's artisan sectors cluster based INA market, or a Delhi heart of that area where people aspire to go for various kind of purpose, which will actually overcome migration, which will increase tourism, which will again create marketplace and connect to the people who are producers, and so on and so forth. So that is one thing that looks like that may increase if we embed digital integration in a very good manner with all these artisanal clusters.
Can we take away the slides so we can have some discussion? Yeah. Does anyone have any suggestions? Would anyone like to add or say something?
I have a suggestion. I'm Meera from Kasar. So, hi Osama. Osama is a great friend. So Osama, we work already in 50 clusters end to end. Can we start this exercise of yours in each of these? I mean, we have an offline presence. We have a commitment to the cluster for next 3 years, which gives us a lot of scope to work with them end to end, right from design and supply chain and institutional strengthening, working capital, financial access, and everything. So we would love to take this as an initiative with you in all of our locations. So we just wanted to know how to go about and what. Thank you.
So rather than being a long answer, I would say I am in Bombay, Meera is in Bombay, you are in Bombay. Maybe we can just get together and see how we can just expand. That's all.
Wonderful. I always thought you were in Delhi, but it's great you are in Mumbai.
I just arrived.
Wonderful. Looking forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Moe, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you, Osama, for sharing the ideas. I definitely agree with you about the importance of, bringing artisans community as part of this knowledge society. And in terms of practical question that I think, always face is that there are so many amount of information that are important to be shared, and where do we begin with? So far, I think we've been focusing more in terms of marketing. So you digitize your products, and you present yourself into an online market platform, and I think that's typical, and that's still required. One other area perhaps we should consider adding is about find a way to connect the producers and those who are making the natural materials. I mean, you have a cotton growers and weavers at different communities. And typically, what I always find terrifying is that artisans don't know where they get their own ingredients or the natural resources. This little weavers communities from Timor-Leste has no clue where their yarns are coming from. It's all imported, and it's a absolutely developing country. Even that kind of situation happens in India, and this is why typically middleman took advantage, right? And so, is there a way of using so-called information technology or egalitarian network between those who grow cottons or silks or dye and these artisans? So that's one submission. And a suggestion for to a big community group here, if somebody wants to pick up the idea, because Osama mentioned about the importance of connecting craft and also with the destinations. Over the past 12 years in India, I always got frustrated why nobody has thought of making the World Heritage gift, World Heritage souvenir. You go to World Heritage sites in India, you have many. You have 39, I think, or a little bit more. And then you go to the World Heritage sites and you only find the made in China teddy bears as a gift, then what's wrong with that, right? So why no, and World Heritage gift is like fantastic branding ideas. Why nobody has thought about this? Please pick up, and I hope one entrepreneur here would pick up the idea and do something about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Moe. Yeah, Nisha, would you like to say something?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to talk to Mo's first point about connecting the suppliers to the artisans. And that is exactly one of the things that the Creative Dignity community platform that we are building is attempting to do, like bring in all the different stakeholders, right from the growers to the artisans to people who work with and not just the designers and the artisans. And but we realized that in order to do this, and for artisans to participate in this community and search for the people that they want on their own, they need this level of intensive capacity building that Osama was talking about. This whole knowledge infrastructure has to be put in place as this is also happening. So that is where I think we are filling that gap here with this program. And hopefully, like with DEF, we'll have that larger impact that we are seeking in this.
Yeah, because we are seeing the farm sector that technology has made inroads, and farmers are using technology to access, relevant information. We're not seeing that yet in the artisan sector. Osama, you have a question for Dr. Badri?
Yeah, I would really like to, not necessarily a conclusive answer, but this entire sector needs a hand holding, and just hand holding. It really doesn't really need huge amount of financial assistance or something, and why it is very important for NITI Ayog to provide that hand is because you have no ministry, you are not a ministry, one ministry versus the other. You want to see the country to have a great planning and great execution, and so that we achieve developmental goals. And it may be a very good way that maybe you can drive togetherness and cohortness, and just highlight these problems and find different solutions from different sectors and different ministries, and bring all of us together to work together. All we need is just that, we don't feel stranded. We don't feel like that we are doing one thing from right hand and the left hand doesn't know, and the left hand is trying and the right hand doesn't know, and things like that. So is that too big a responsibility or too big a task? But that is something that we are expecting if it is possible from your side.
Yeah, thanks, Sama. Yeah, I think definitely we have to do that. In general, we have been working on SMEs, MSMEs. There is a dedicated vertical on MSMEs, and our job is to listen to the problems, the issues faced at the ground level, and then connect with the different ministries, because mostly the problems cannot be solved by like one ministry or one bureaucrat, one minister, one person. So you need the collaboration between different organizations. So I completely understand what you're saying, and it's not about subsidies, it's not about tax incentives and so on. It's more about understanding the problems, coming up with solutions, and see what connecting the dots, basically see what is missing at different levels. Many times the ministries, you may not know what are the problems that are happening that prevail at the ground level. At the ground level, they may not know what are the things that the government is offering. So we have to connect all these different missing things, and obviously we are very much game for that. We have to do that. It's part of our responsibility, and and this particular issue, artisans and their connection to the market and so on. This is a very, very important thing, and because this not only concerns with the economic and trade, commerce, these kind of things, but also it also connects to the creativity of people, and also to a large extent the tradition and the culture of this country, because a lot of the artisans are connected to that. So it's a much bigger thing than what we typically imagine it to be. Typically, we think of it as a small sector that suffers, that needs our assistance and so on, but it's not like that. So I'm completely with you, and we'll keep this in consideration and see whatever we can do in this regard. So we'll continue to participate in this discussion and take it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll definitely take you up on this, and we will be getting into more conversations with you later. I think Shalini wanted to ask a question. Veena also has a hand up. Shalini, would you like to?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Meera. Actually, it's a question and also something that I want to throw at everyone here. When we talk about formalization, like Dr. Badri mentioned before, and the term formal has been used many times in our discussion today. Of course, what we want is the sort of motivation behind is that the small artisans or their enterprises get recognized, and then they can access schemes or whatever benefits that the government can provide for them, and the government can also know the sort of the space and the magnitude of these either artisans or their small enterprises, and design something for them. But of course, we also know, as also has been mentioned before, that the whole registration process, formalization process, as we understand it for industry and not artisans, is going to be very costly. It's going to be costly for the government. It's going to be costly for the artisans. Apart from the fact that, it is not just about the financial cost, but even other costs, the time cost, and artisans working at such a small scale, or even their enterprises working at such a small scale, sort of conventional idea of formalization may not work there. But the motivation, of course, is to be able to identify them and to be able to support them, just like Osama was saying, how do you, but then if we can't identify them, how are we going to support them? My question to the house here is that what might be an innovative way of actually identifying them so that they can access resources, they can access support from whichever quarter, whether it is coming from the government or from other sources. I'll stop there.
That's a very good question, Shalini, because how do you ensure that the same traditional hierarchies don't continue with the technology as the new resource? So who would like to take that question?
I would not like to take the question. I would like to take the challenge. Maybe we will work on that to create an integral platform where people can actually look for resources available across ministries and sectors and all that, which is directly related to the sector that it is sought for by the various stakeholders in the sector. So it's something like, I'm artisan, I'm looking for something. Okay, there are 5 things. How do I look for, and how do I find? And then similarly, I'm a buyer, and then how do I look for? And then I'm a designer. How do I look for? And so on and so forth. So basically, mapping different stakeholders, and then related to that, direct sectors, indirect sectors, and other stakeholders. I think it is a brilliant idea. It's a very, very good idea. It is something like not to waste money to create something which already exists, and actually to avail something that exists, and so on and so forth. You know, this is where technology can really play a very good role, and very, very critical role, and things like that. So I would say that, being Digital Empowerment Foundation, I think we should certainly we have a moral obligation to take this up.
I just wanted to also make one point, you know, in the handloom census, the latest handloom census, the government itself has said that 75% of artisans are not able to access all the schemes that the government is running for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Veena, would you like to ask your question?
My question is what Shalini's already asked, but I would just like to add one thing here, that considering the pandemic and the impact, if we can have now, Dr. Badri Narayanan has left, but this question was for him. If we can start some small subsidies for the very small and the very tired weaver, I think it's going to really help. And it should be a short time subsidy, not just for the handloom weaver, but I think for a lot of artisans. And I think, to answer one of Shalini's questions that also summarizes what I was also putting forth, is I think under Creative Dignity, we've done some great amount of work. And I think all the stakeholders who put this together in terms of mapping artisans, I think the local state anchor and the team is quite well equipped to map the artisans. And if it really take it seriously, I think we should be able to map at least 60 to 70% of the artisans and the weavers. And I think if this work is done, then what Osama is trying to do may just work out. So my question was largely what Shalini was asking. This is just 1 or 2 points that I wanted to add to it.
Thanks, Veena. I think that's really the idea, that, you know, and I think we all know that just technology by itself cannot be transformational. It requires a whole lot of other supports that go along with it.
Yeah.
So anybody else has any closing comments? Any other suggestions, ideas? I think Moe has asked a question.
Sorry, I think mine was a bit a provocative question, but it's about corruption, which is also part of your intangible cultural heritage, as I love to call it. But I'm sorry, it's please censor my statement. But yeah, no, one is it's important to map the artisans, and with objective to ensure that the schemes reach to the right, you know, the right persons. But the problem, another problem in India, is that it's not that you didn't have enough scheme or you didn't have enough budget. Simply the money didn't go to the right persons. And so another challenge actually is also about tracking, right? So of course, that's a huge, that's going to be a huge task. I'm not expecting Osama, even the genius Mr. Osama Manzar, to find the magic wand to find this long entrenched problems or corruptions in the in the country. But then, but just to flag this, or maybe a question as to whether a technology, you know, is something that would find a solution to, you know, to counter that inherent traditions in India.
Yeah, it's a very pertinent point. Maybe technology can give direct access and open up opportunities. You know, that's one hope. But yeah, Osama, you would like to say something?
Oh, I think Moe already said that I should not.
So before we close today, would anybody else like to say anything? And if not, then we can close today's session.
Yeah, we are already from 52 to 42.
Yes.
So
Yes.
before everybody runs away,
Yeah,
we should
yeah.
respect their time and say thank you very much. I think you really gave a lot of encouragement for being here with such a good number. Very encouraging. I think, Meera, we should also make clip out of this entire recording and share it and also make a report out of it and also follow it up with action point and
Yes,
share
so-
with all the participants also.
Correct. So I just wanted to close by saying that we will make some points that have emerged from this session and share it with Catalyst as well, because they're putting together a whole lot of points which can then be taken forward for, lobbying and policy and so on. So yes, we should definitely do that and share it with all the participants. So with this, we'll close the session. Thank you everyone very much for attending. The panelists, the attendees, all of you. And I also want to thank the DF team and the CD team for putting this whole session together. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.